Good afternoon. We're bringing today's Education and Economic Development budget hearing to order. Today, we will be hearing the budgets for the Maryland State Department of Education Aid to Education and the MSCE Early Childhood budget. We'll first begin with Ms. Laura Hyde with the budget analysis.
Thank you, Chair Smith. We're starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary. The aid to education budget grows by $315 million or 3.2% to $10.1 billion. This increase is primarily attributable to a net increase of $285 million for major state aid, with approximately half of that amount, $141 million, allocated as general funds for teacher retirement. Turning to page 6, Exhibit 1. This is English and Language Arts MCAP scores. This chart shows that in spring 2023, the majority of students scored beginning or developing at all grade levels except for grade 10, in which 53.5% of students scored proficient or distinguished. The lowest proficient or distinguished score was in grade 5, with 41.8% of students at this level of proficiency. Turning to page 7. This is Exhibit 2, Math MCAP scores. This chart shows that in spring 2023, the majority of students scored either beginning or developing in math, with the highest share of proficient and distinguished scores occurring in grade 3 at 40.3%, and the lowest share of proficient distinguished scores occurring in grade 8 at 7.5%. The bold language on page 7 asks MSDE to comment on the reason for the omission of the Algebra 2 data in the fiscal 2025 Managing for Results submission. Turning to page 8, Exhibit 3. This is a comparison of MCAP proficient and distinguished scores for ELA in math in grades 3 through 8. This chart shows that more students scored proficient or distinguished in ELA than mathematics at each grade level. The smallest achievement gap between ELA and math is 7.7 percentage points in grade 3, and the largest achievement gap is 39.3 percentage points in grade 8. The bold language on page 8 states that DLS recommends adopting committee narrative, requesting a report on MCAP scores and LEA progress to remediate COVID-19 related learning loss. Turning to page 11, Exhibit 4, this is an overview of agency spending. This exhibit shows that across all programs in the aid to education budget, the total fiscal 25 allowance is approximately $10 billion, with which approximately 74% is general funds. The majority of funds in the fiscal 2025 aid education allowance are distributed to LEAs and include both general funds and blueprint special funds. Turning to page 12, Exhibit 5, this is the state fund allowance, and this exhibit breaks out the $8.9 billion in state funds in fiscal 2025 in this budget. Foundation programs total $3.9 billion or 44%. Compensatory education receives $1.7 billion or 19%. Teacher retirement receives $886 million or 10%, and that does not include the $46 million budgeted in DBM statewide account. And students with disabilities receive $731 million or 8%, with the remaining programs accounting for approximately $1.6 billion or 19% of the total allowance. Turning to page 13, Exhibit 6, this is the federal fund allowance. This exhibit breaks out the $1.2 billion in federal funds in fiscal 25 in the aid education budget. And of this amount, the majority of funds, about $1 billion or 89%, is allocated to 3 programs. $483 million or 41% for food services, 26%, $302 million for education of deprived children, and $262 million or 22% for students with disabilities. Turning to page 14, Exhibit 7, this is the proposed budget. This exhibit displays all the changes from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25 in the aid to education budget. And starting at the top of the chart, net changes to major state aid programs total about $288 million. The primary general fund increase is the $141 million mentioned earlier for teacher retirement. There's $101.5 million for blueprint programs, for which the primary increase is $131 million for the concentration of poverty grant, and then $5.3 million in federal fund grants. Net decreases in this budget include $110,000 for legislatively directed initiatives. This was one-time funding in the fiscal 24 budget. $33 million for other general fund changes. That includes the $22 million for non-certificated support professional bonuses. These were funded in fiscal 23 and 24. And then $10 million for the Teacher Development and Retention Fund, which was transferred to MHAG, Student Financial Assistance Budget. And then there's also a decrease of $45.5 million for federal funds for COVID-19 relief, which passed through the aid to education budget in fiscal 24. There's details of these program changes in Appendix 8. Turning to page 17, Exhibit 8, this is the enrollment change from fall 2019 to 2023. So despite a second year of increases in all major state aid programs, enrollment in fall 2023 remains about 20,000 students lower, or 2.4% than fall 2019. Changes in major state aid programs for the 23-24 school year include full-time equivalent enrollment gaining slightly by about 1,000 students, and FRPM enrollment increasing by 5,600 students, special education enrollment increasing by about 5,000 students, and LEP enrollment increasing by about 6,000 students. Turning to page 18, this is Exhibit 9. This shows major state aid to LEAs. This is total public school aid increases by 5.2%, or $450 million, from $8.6 billion in fiscal 24 to $9.1 billion in fiscal 25. Other education aid, other state aid programs, those at the bottom of the chart, increase by $82.4 million, or 43%. But this increase is also due to the teacher retirement I noted earlier, budgeted in DBM, and then an increase of $36 million for pre-kindergarten and early childhood programs. Then turning to page 20 and 21, these are exhibits 10 and 11. This shows the distribution of blueprint funds to blueprint programs in the state budget. And so this is the fiscal 25 allowance shows a total of $1.9 billion, 1.95 in blueprint funds for these programs, of which 1.6 billion, or 83%, is in the aid to education budget, 200 million, or 10%, is in the early childhood budget, and 116 million, or 6%, is in the Maryland Department of Health budget. 19 million, or 1%, is in other program budgets, and that includes funding for the Accountability and Implementation Board and personnel and MSD headquarters. Turning to page 22, this is Exhibit 12. These are blueprint costs and funding sources in the governor's budget. And this graph shows that the fiscal 2025 proposed budget has a starting balance of $2.6 billion. Projected revenues are $1.4 billion, with expenditures totaling about $2 billion. With these expenditures, the carryover balance from fiscal 25 to 26 totals $2.1 billion. And then starting in fiscal 27, this graph shows that blueprint fund revenues may not cover all eligible program costs, which results in a general fund contribution of approximately $429 million in that year, with blueprint program costs projected to exceed revenues by approximately $2.6 billion in fiscal 2029. Now we're turning to the issues section of this analysis. This starts on page 24. The first issue regards FRPM enrollment. So under section 522 of the education article, MSD is required to submit enrollment counts for all major state aid programs, which includes counts of free and reduced price meal students, or FRPM students. And this is used to determine funding for the compensatory education and concentration of poverty programs. In a review of the fiscal 24 FRPM data, DLS identified concerns in MSD's enrollment counts, and as a result, language in the fiscal 24 budget bill required MSD to report on the agency's progress to collect and verify the fiscal 24 compensatory education enrollment data. The primary concern for a compensatory enrollment education count is that the statute requires 3 separate school level counts of students to be identified through free and reduced price meals, community eligibility provision, and direct certification. And DLS's review of the data submitted for the JCR identified that the greater than comparison across all 3 counts was omitted, along with other concerns. These can be found on page 25. Similarly, in our review of MSD's second submission of these data for the JCR, these same issues were observed, as well as in the fiscal 2025 data. So the bold language on page 26 notes actually that Even though DLS does not recommend the release of funds for this JCR, this submission meets the requirement in the JCR for the release of $1.5 million pending the submission of all JCR reports in certain budget codes. And then further down, moving to page 26, further down on that page is a related issue with FRPM counts in the fiscal 25 enrollment submission that affects the concentration of poverty program. These concerns include the concerns in the previous list, along with emissions of FRPM percentages for every school, which affects the CPG count, particularly using the 3-year average of FRPM counts to determine eligibility for the per pupil grant. On page 27, the bold language then asks MSD to respond to these concerns and recommends adding language to restrict funds for a report on this issue. Also at the bottom of page 27, there's a related issue on P-TECH enrollment counts that requires clarification, and there's bold language also for that issue. Turning to page 29, this is Exhibit 13. This is on autism enrollment and costs. This issue is related to the increase in slots for the autism waiver program and increased costs to service those slots. In our analysis of the budget for this program, DLS found that even though funds are remaining from a fiscal 23 allowance of $30 million to fund this expansion, the fiscal 25 budget may be inadequate to fund the expansion and a deficiency appropriation may be required. Even if the expansion is delayed until fiscal 25, available state funds are only adequate to support about 2,300 children for this entire year instead of the authorized 2,950 authorized slots that the state is seeking. So the bold language on page 29 asks MSD to comment on this issue and recommends continuing committee narrative on this program. Then turning to page 30. This is Exhibit 14. This is ESSER allocations and expenditures by LEA. So as of December 2023, MSD reports that LEAs have spent a total of $1.7 billion or 61% of all ESSER funds, including $185 million or 99% of ESSER 1 funds, $725 million or 93% of ESSER 2 funds, and $775 million or 44% of ESSER 3 funds. Funds unspent by the required date are canceled and returned to the federal government. Appendix 3 and 4 provide additional details on these allocations and expenditures. And then on page 32, this is Exhibit 15. This shows expenditures for these ESSER allocations by category for this $1.7 billion, with the majority of funds, approximately $1.1 billion for instruction and instructional salaries and wages. Turning to page 33, this is Exhibit 16. This is Relief Act allocations. So in addition to federal funds distributed directly to LEA, in fiscal 21, 22, and 23, LEAs received a total of $256.6 million from the Relief Act for tutoring, behavioral health, summer school, school reopening, and transitional supplemental instruction. This chart shows that a total of $185 million, or 72% of these funds have been expended. As part of mandated reporting in Chapter 55 on these funds, LEAs were required to report expenditures to the General Assembly and the Accountability and Implementation Board through calendar 2023. As of January 2024, all LEAs, except for Somerset County, submitted these reports. And there were some LEAs that had COVID-19 reports that did not SIP data or had data that needed to be more accurately accounting expenditures. So the bold language on page 33 recommends 2 actions. First, language restricting funds for the Somerset County Public Schools until late reports have been received as part of Chapter 55, and then also requiring all 24 LEAs to submit a final closeout report on these same expenditures in the format that was asked for in Chapter 55. Page 34 starts the recommended actions for this analysis. That concludes my presentation, and I stand for questions.
Thank you so much for your analysis. Are there any questions for Ms. Hyde? Seeing none, we welcome MSD to come forth. Hello, Superintendent. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Is this your full panel?
This is my full panel.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, it is.
Before you begin, I do want to lift up that I'm not certain how this came about, but the submissions for both budgets came in late to DLS staff. So as you can imagine, these are pretty sizable budgets. They're pretty significant. And as you could also imagine, that meant that was a lot for our analysts to digest with less time than is adequate. So I just wanted to be on the record that I don't know where in the process, if there was a hiccup, but I just wanted you to be aware of that, because that definitely put an undue burden on DLS staff that's already extremely stretched during the 90-day session. So I just wanted to put that on your radar.
Well, my apologies if it was on our end. I'll certainly look into that. Thank
No
you.
worries.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Carrie Wright, the interim state superintendent of schools. And with me today is Krishna Talur. He is the deputy state superintendent for operations and finance. And Donna Gunning is the assistant state superintendent of the office of finance. And I want to grab the wrong thing. I want to take a minute to thank you for your hard work. And before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about what we're doing on our end. And I do have the wrong speaking points. Yes, I do. I'm so sorry. I grabbed the wrong folder. We've got two back to back and I grabbed the wrong talking points. I apologize. We have initiated a large literacy initiative aligned to the science of reading. The board passed that resolution. We are moving forward on that. That will entail also the hiring of literacy instructional review teams to be out in all 24 LEAs and observing classrooms, giving us feedback on what they're seeing and us giving them feedback on what we are noticing as well. Our expert review teams have already been out and about in a number of districts, and they are looking at different kinds of subjects, not just literacy. And so we're using that feedback also to inform our decision-making where it comes to professional development. We have launched a math initiative focused on very systemic change. It's called Launch Years. Thank you. We are partnering with the Dana Center from UT Austin and looking at our math pathways, not only just in high school, but starting down in the elementary level. We have been implementing the processes around identifying and approving a CCR standard, which is in our blueprint for all children to meet by the end of grade 10. We've also been working to engage philanthropic organizations who have reached out to us, asking us how they can get involved in Maryland to support our work. And that work has to do with apprenticeships, work-based learning. We are involved in one local and one national initiative. The national one is called Launch, supported by your major philanthropic organizations around the nation. And the one local is called Talent Ready. But there are also other philanthropic organizations that have reached out to us to see how they can help us support our literacy work. I want to thank Laura Hyde and obviously apologize to you on our behalf for the amount of extra time that you had to take since it got to you late. But Laura, I thank you so much for your thorough review. Thank you for your partnership, and know that we will continue to do much better in the future. And we're always here to respond to your questions if asked. I'm going to turn this over to Krishna Talur, who's going to review our department's response to the analysis, and then we will be open to your questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Krishna Talur, Deputy State Superintendent for Finance and Operations. The details of our comments and analysis have been presented to the committee. I'm going to go over the summary of our responses here. The first item we are addressing is MSDE was asked to comment on the reason for the omission of the Algebra 2 data in the fiscal 2025 Managing for Results submission. This data was not included for the following reasons. The Algebra 2 test is not a grade level test in which all students are tested. Therefore, only a fraction of students take the test. Algebra 2 test was formally recommended as the assessment for students to demonstrate college and career readiness by grade 11. And the new college and career readiness standard does not allow the Algebra 2 test to be used to demonstrate readiness. MSDE was asked to comment on higher number and amounts of encumbrances for fiscal 2023. Department was asked to comment on the number of encumbrances at the end of fiscal 2023. The encumbrances are predominantly associated with federal funds that have access to the tidings provision, which enables recipients to access the funds for 27 months. The remaining encumbrances associated with general and special funds are associated with the current year funded programs that are not fully reconciled until after the close of the fiscal year. By the fall, the funds are fully reconciled and available balances are canceled. MSDE was asked to address legislative priorities in fiscal 2024. One of the recipients that was mentioned in the analysis, one of the recipients has access to the funding, and the department is working with the other recipient to gather the required documentation in order to provide access to the funds included in FY 2024 budget. DLS recommends that MSDE continue to work to resolve the issues in the second submission of the fiscal 2024 FRPM data prior to the end of fiscal year to allow for a release of funds. DLS is not recommending a release of funds at this time. Additionally, MSDE is asked to comment on concerns in the fiscal 24 and 2025 enrollment counts for the compensatory education and CPG programs. MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to continue to withhold funds. While MSDE believes that it has provided the requested information in many times and different formats, the department is willing to meet with the DLS staff to review the process for calculating the compensatory education program and the impact of compensatory education student count on the concentration of poverty grant program. It is important to note that schools and LEAs primarily use free or reduced price meal eligibility data to ensure all eligible students receive the meals they are entitled to receive, and not as a measure of student poverty. Free or reduced price meal eligibility is used as a proxy for a student level count of economic disadvantage. MSDE was asked to describe the enrollment counts for PTech students as it relates to the enrollment count required for the foundation program. The department recognizes the errors made in the FY 2023 and FY 2024 PTech enrollment counts. These are addressed in the analysis that were submitted. The PTech program includes students in the enrollment count for the foundation program for 6 years, a full FTE in the 4 years of high school, and a partial FTE for 2 years of community college. In the 5th and 6th year, the foundation count is reduced. Foundation enrollment count is reduced by 0.5 and 0.75 respectively for the number of courses the student is taking at the community college, 2 in year 5 and 3 in year 6. Regarding the autism waiver, MSDE was asked to discuss 4 items. These are the reason that the individuals on the wait list are considered for autism waiver services on first come, first served basis. Approved application through Centers for Medicare and Medicaid is first come and first served, first come, first served. Change would require amendment to the application. Change would require policies, procedure, and staff to conduct eligibility determination. Change would require the determination of priority status for every individual on wait list ongoing. The second item was to comment on the current status of the registry and a timetable for onboarding additional slots. In alignment with the End the Wait legislation, MDH and MSDE are implementing a plan to serve 2,950 participants in fiscal 2024. 1,100 applications to apply have already been sent to families. The third item is the intended use and timing of the remaining DPA funds if the slots become available in fiscal 2024. And the analysis contains the data for the Q1 and Q2 actuals and projects for Q3 and Q4. The last item was to comment on the number of slots that will be filled in fiscal 2025, given the limitations in the budget. Due to the ongoing changes to the autism waiver programs, DLS recommends a committee narrative on this program. In accordance with the End the Wait legislation, MSDE intends on serving 2,950 participants through the autism waiver in 2025. Finally, MSDE concurs with the recommendations as presented for the operating budget recommended action. With that, the department's response ends and we are ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions for the agency? Seeing none, I think you probably should just stay in place. We do have, that will conclude the budget hearing for MSDE Aid to Education. And at this time, we will hear from Miss Natalie Andrade. Is that correct? This is her first time presenting to EED, so we welcome her.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Andrade, and I'm here with the Department of Legislative Services to present the fiscal 25 allowance for the Early Childhood Development Unit under the Maryland State Department of Education. On page 1 of this analysis, you can see that the fiscal 25 budget decreases by $5 million to $709.3 million. I'm going to turn to page 4, where there is an analysis of some performance measures. The first one is the kindergarten readiness assessment. And the main insight here is that these assessment results have improved slightly following the pandemic decline. As you can see in Exhibit 1 on page 5, in the 22-23 school year, 41.6% of assessed kindergarteners demonstrated readiness for kindergarten, reflecting a 2.1 percentage point raise from the preceding school year. Although this outcome is a slight improvement, it remains below the pre-pandemic level reported in the 2019-2020 school year, when 46.7% of kindergarteners demonstrated readiness. Among the subgroups, the direct certified children experienced the largest improvement in KRA results in the 22-23 school year, with a 6.4 percentage point increase from the previous school year, while children with disabilities and English learners have demonstrated minimal improvement compared to the previous school year. The 23 Blueprint Comprehensive Implementation Plan requested that MSDE submit a report to AIB by December 1, 2023, evaluating KRI for any racial, cultural, or linguistic bias and for any potential bias in its administration. As of February 13, 2024, AIB reported that MSDE had not submitted the KR report. MSDE should provide an update on KRA evaluation activities requested by AIB and the timeline for submitting the requested report. Second, we have an analysis of the childcare capacity. The main insight on Exhibit 2 on page 7 is that despite the slowing decline, childcare capacity remains stagnant post-pandemic. As you can see on Exhibit 2, following the closure of 10,570 licensed childcare slots statewide during COVID-19 pandemic, the rate of decline in childcare capacity is gradually approaching pre-pandemic levels. In fiscal 22 and fiscal 23, the change in capacity stood at minus 0.7% and minus 0.4% respectively. According to MSDE, the decline in capacity is primarily attributed to the closure of family childcare programs. Despite efforts to stabilize and support the childcare sector, the overall capacity has not shown significant improvement and has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. MSDE should comment on the specific factors contributing to the continued decrease in childcare capacity and should discuss performance measures that it is collecting and monitoring to evaluate the effectiveness of initiatives like growing opportunities in family childcare program, Maryland Rebuilds grants, childcare stabilization grants, and other support to improve childcare providers' business practices. 3, we have the childcare scholarship program, customer service, and application processing. MSD has acknowledged delays and challenges for childcare providers and families participating in the childcare scholarship program related to application processing times and the delivery of invoices and scholarships. So committee narrative in the 23 Joint Chairman's report requested that MSDE include goals, objectives, and performance measures related to the childcare scholarship program, customer service, and application processing in its annual managing for results. The Department of Legislative Services notes that these performance measures tend to focus on processing initial presumptive eligibility applications and payments rather than the full application process to determine long-term eligibility or renewal. MSDE should discuss the availability of customer service and application processing measures for the period after the presumptive eligibility ends. On page 8, there's a discussion about the proposed deficiency. The fiscal 25 budget includes one proposed deficiency appropriation of $217.9 million in general funds to support prior year shortfalls in unanticipated current year shortfalls in the childcare scholarship program. Exhibit 3 on page 9 shows the breakdown of the fiscal 25 allowance. As you can see, more than half of the budget goes to the childcare scholarship with 58%. 22% of the budget goes to the publicly funded pre-kindergarten, and 6% goes to the wraparound and supported services. Exhibit 4 on pages 10 and 11 shows the proposed budget changes. And as you can see here, as I mentioned before, the fiscal 25 allowance decreases by $5 million compared to the fiscal 24 working appropriation. The primary contributing factor to this change is a reduction of $83 million in supplemental childcare development block grant funds authorized in the ARPA to support the childcare scholarship program, and a decrease of $11.2 million to support the pre-kindergarten capacity building grant. This decrease is partially offset by increases in various initiatives, such as state fund support for the childcare scholarship program with an increase of $52 million and an increase of $33 million for the pre-kindergarten formula funding. Now I'm going to turn to page 13, which begins the discussion of the issues that we want to present to the committees. The first issue is related to the childcare scholarship program. The main insight here is that the fiscal 25 allowance includes cost-saving measures under the child scholarship program following significant fiscal 23 and 24 shortfalls. Now I'm going to turn to page 14 and Exhibit 5, childcare scholarship program enrollment experienced a notable increase from 15,200 children served in January 2021 to 13,800 children served in October 2023. This is a 102% increase. This rapid doubling of enrollment occurred over approximately 2 years following the gradual decline during the COVID-19 pandemic. And starting from January 22, the year-over-year change, the line in black, in the Exhibit 5, in enrollment increase each month, specifically the childcare scholarship enrollment from October 22 to October 23 has consistently exceeded the pre-pandemic height of 20,900 children enrolled in October 19, reaching a peak of 31,300 children enrolled in September 2023. Also, we have that the sharp increase in enrollment coincided with significant policy changes that encourage more children, families, and providers to participate. These policy changes include reduction in copays, waived copays for individuals participating in certain public benefit programs, expanded income eligibility, increased reimbursement rates, the introduction of advanced enrollment payments, and the implementation of a fast-track application process or presumptive eligibility. Now I'm going to talk about the increased cost related to the childcare scholarship program. One contributing factor for the increased cost is related to the replacement of the childcare administration track system, CCATS. MSD introduced advanced enrollment-based payments and the fast-track application process, which added to the program's administrative expenses. These changes, along with customer service improvements, led to MSDE updating CCATS, particularly the development and implementation for family and provider portals, automated data entry for childcare scholarship application, and the establishment of the fast track portal. MSDE should comment on the timing of implementing these administrative and information technology changes and their associated cost. Also, MSDE should comment on any additional processing and customer service changes planned with the CCS program. On page 17, Exhibit 6 shows the total fund spending on childcare scholarship payments, and these payments increased significantly by $250.2 million from fiscal 22 to fiscal 25. And due to ongoing cost per programmatic changes, enrollment growth, and the end of one-time ARPA support, the program expenses outpace available federal fund sources beginning in fiscal 23. MSD closed fiscal 23 with a deficit and anticipates a continued shortfall in fiscal 24. As a result, and as I mentioned before, the fiscal 25 allowance includes a proposed deficiency totaling $217.9 million in general funds, with $42.9 million covering the fiscal 23 shortfall and $175 million supporting the fiscal 24 spending. Exhibit 7 on page 18 shows the estimates for the childcare scholarship expenditures prepared by the Regional Economic Studies Institute, RESI. RESI prepared low, middle, and high scenario cost for the exhibit, and the exhibit shows only the middle scenario. Compared to the actual expending in fiscal 2023 and budgeted funding in fiscal 24 and fiscal 25. The estimates are based on current policy and do not include estimated savings from any cost containment measures. It should be noted that the RESI's initial middle scenario estimated provided in January 23 for total childcare scholarship expenditures in fiscal 23 were $248.4 million, significantly lower by $102 million than the actual expenditures of $350 million. Similarly, the December 23 forecast continued to display lower fiscal 23 forecast spending than actual expenditures. MSDE indicated that this forecast only included services provided during fiscal 23 and excludes the July 23 advance payment issued in June 2023. The discrepancy observing the estimates for fiscal 23 raises questions regarding the accuracy of RESI's estimates for the following fiscal years. MSDE should comment on a plan and timeline to competitively bid the CCS program forecasting services in the future. When comparing the fiscal 25 allowance, as you can see in Exhibit 7, the fiscal 25 allowance of $412.4 million to the forecasted expenditures in fiscal 25, there is a deficit of $20.8 million. On page 19, there is a discussion about the proposed childcare scholarship program cost containment measures. The increased childcare scholarship expenditures and related shortfalls have led to concerns related to the affordability and sustainability of the program for the state. To limit program cost, MSDE notified the appropriate committee chairs on January 9, 2024 of plans to increase family copays for new families enrolling in the program and those renewing their eligibility redetermination beginning July 1, 2024. As you can see in Exhibit 8, the potential copay scale would align with income brackets relative to the state median income. Families with incomes falling within the 35% or below the state median income threshold could have their copayment waived entirely. Families between 36 and 54% of SMI could contribute to copayment equivalent to 3% of their gross income, while those at 55% or above the state median income could contribute 7% of their gross income. MSDE indicated that the current scholarship recipients could not pay a copay until their eligibility is redetermined at the expiration of their scholarship term. On page 21, there is a discussion about the authorization to freeze the childcare scholarship program enrollment. A proposed action in the BERFA of 2024 will remove the restriction on enrollment freezes and provide MSDE with the authority to introduce an enrollment freeze. MSDE indicated that it doesn't have plans to initiate a waitlist in fiscal 2025. MSDE didn't provide details for spending or enrollment growth levels that could trigger an enrollment freeze and the income categories that could be impacted. Related, the cost containment impact on fiscal 25 allowance. The savings from the copayment should help to eliminate the gap between the allowance and the RESI forecast for fiscal 25 expenses. MSDE indicated that the fiscal 25 allowance does not incorporate potential savings from the possibility of an enrollment freeze. It is concerning that there is a lack of clarity on when an enrollment freeze could be triggered or how it could be implemented. So given the significance of copay increases and potential enrollment freezes in managing the childcare scholarship program cost and resolving the potential 20 million deficit in fiscal 25, MSDE should provide a detailed saving estimates for increasing copays and implementation and enrollment freeze. The second issue is related to the early childhood programs under the blueprint for Maryland's future. The fiscal 25 allowance includes $220.9 million in total funds for blueprint mandate supporting early childhood programs. All early childhood programs expanded or funded through Chapter 36 meet the mandated funding levels. However, the Maryland Child Care Credential Program does not receive funding in fiscal 25, as Chapter 36 only required 10% increases in program funding each year through fiscal 24. Regarding the pre-kindergarten formula on Exhibit 10, you can see that the fiscal 25 pre-kindergarten formula funding increases by $33 million compared to the fiscal 24 working appropriation. Exhibit 11 on page 25 shows the funding levels and enrollment for publicly funded full-day pre-kindergarten slots beginning in fiscal 2018. And from fiscal 2018 to fiscal 2022, MSDE funded full-day services by awarding pre-kindergarten supplemental grants to local school systems based on the number of 4-year-old students they enroll in public programs. Chapter 36 established phasing timeline beginning in fiscal 23, in which MSDE and local school systems fund 3-year-old and 4-year-old children with family incomes are or below 300% of the federally poverty level in both public and private programs through the full-day pre-kindergarten formula. As you can see in Exhibit 11, the fiscal 24 working appropriation and the fiscal 25 allowance include $99.6 million and $132.6 million for the pre-kindergarten, respectively, pre-kindergarten formula. These funds will support 27,000 children in fiscal 24 and 30,700 children in fiscal 25 across public and private pre-kindergarten slots. Chapter 119 of 2023 changes the definition of Tier 1 children within the publicly funded full-day pre-kindergarten program. So MSDE should clarify whether it incorporated the updated definition of Tier 1 children as outlined in Chapter 119 into calculation of the full-day pre-kindergarten formula funding in fiscal 24 or 25. Issue 3 is related to the proposed pre-kindergarten sliding scale. As part of the full-day pre-kindergarten formula established in Chapter 36, MSDE is required to implement a sliding scale subsidized pre-kindergarten services for families earning more than 300% of federally poverty level, but not exceeding the 600% of the federally poverty level. These are known as the Tier 2 students by the start of the 24-25 school year. Regarding the pre-kindergarten tier distribution, the enrollment count taken on September 30, 2022 in the 22-23 school year marked the first instance of collecting household income data from families of pre-kindergarten students for the purposes of determining income tiers under the full-day formula. For the Tier 2 families, only 1,748 students were identified. So the financial analysis of sliding scale options for Tier 2 families was based on these students, these 1,700 students. As you can see in Exhibit 12 on page 27, MSD conducted a financial analysis to assess the impact of 4 proposed sliding scale methodologies for Tier 2 students, aiming to identify the most cost-effective option for families. As you can see in Exhibit 12, option 4 has emerged as the least expensive for families, requiring a total family contribution of $7.3 million. So MSD recommended the implementation of a sliding scale option 4, and Exhibit 3 on page 28 details the sliding scale framework used in option 4. And as you can see, families are capped at a maximum contribution of 7% of their annual income. Here we have some considerations regarding the proposed sliding scale options. The first one is related to the absence of income tier data for 38% of pre-kindergarten students enrolled as of September 30, 2022. This raises concerns about potential underrepresentation of the actual total cost of services. And the second one is the assumption of a family of 4 and the use of fiscal 22 federal poverty level in the calculation. This could influence the accuracy of the projected cost of pre-kindergarten services. And the estimations should also consider cost of living differences across the counties. So MSD should comment on the absence of income tier data for 38% of pre-kindergarten students. Their plans to improve the collection of household income data from families of pre-kindergarten students, whether the fiscal 25 allowance calculate the full day pre-kindergarten formula funding level based on the sliding scale option 4, and the process and timeline for approval and implementation of the sliding scale methodology, specifying whether this process involves receiving feedback or approval from the General Assembly. Finally, the last issue is related to the childcare stabilization grants. And on page 30, Exhibit 4, you can see the stabilization grant allocation spanning September 21 to September 23. During this period, $203 million was designated for childcare centers and $126 million for family childcare providers. The funding distribution includes $295 million from federal grants across 3 rounds, and supplemented by an additional $34 million from a state grant payment in the 3rd round, resulting in a total of $329 million in grant payments. This financial support reached a total of 22,800 childcare providers. At the end of fiscal 23, $16.2 million in general funds budgeted in fiscal 22 for childcare stabilization grants were reverted in error. MSD indicated that those funds were encumbered at the end of fiscal 22, since grant awards had been determined but not yet processed. At the end of fiscal 23, there was still $16.2 million in leftover funding from this grant program. Therefore, the funds were reverted during fiscal 23 closeout. MSD should clarify whether it still intends to make the plan award, and if so, what funds will support the awards. Regarding the grant expenditures by use, you can see in Exhibit 15 on page 31 that based on the first round of the ARPA childcare stabilization grant application, 54% of the childcare providers indicated their intention to use the grants to fund personnel cost. 19% expressed their intention to allocate funds for rent, mortgage, and taxes, and the remaining 27% of providers plan to direct the funds toward utilities, maintenance, services, and equipment. MSD should provide an actual expenditure of a stabilization grant across all rounds. Finally, regarding the stabilization grants across jurisdictions, Exhibit 16 shows the distribution of stabilization grants. And you can see that providers in Montgomery County received the largest portion of the funds at $66 million, followed by providers in Baltimore County with $47 million. In contrast, providers from Garrett, Kent, and Somerset counties have received less than $1 million. And this is primarily attributed to the limited number of childcare and family childcare providers in those counties relative to others. And to conclude my presentation, on page 34 and 35 at DLS, we have outlined some recommended actions for the committees to take, which is to request that MSD submit a report on plans for a childcare scholarship program waiting list, and requesting a report on the childcare scholarship quarterly expenditure report. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Andrade, for your presentation. Did a great job in your debut here. Are there any questions for the analysts? Seeing none, thank you. And back at MSDE Early Childhood.
Okay, thank you. And I'm joined now by Dr. Shana Cook, who oversees all of our early childhood programming. And I want to talk a little bit about the early childhood programs in Maryland. Maryland definitely has one of the most generous childcare programs in the nation, which is one of the reasons that you see the significant increases in participation from both caregivers and providers. This is allowing 20,000 families to work with other families in the program, getting training and schooling they may not have otherwise had been able to receive. This program is serving more children every year. And with that, I want to talk about the fact that we are serving in FY23, we served 32,945 children, which was a 37% increase from the 24,007 children we served in 22, and 21,206 families is a 40% increase over the 15,164 families we served the prior year. Maryland has gone from serving only families making less than about $42,000 for a family of four to serving families making up to about $90,000 for a family of four. It's also made a tremendous stride by increasing provider reimbursement rates, going from the 9th percentile of market rate in 2018 to the 70th percentile currently. This in part has led to an 11% increase in providers participating in the program since FY22. Nearly half of all childcare providers in the state are taking part. And it's due to note that we are one of the few states that is gaining in providers, while many of the other states are losing providers. Maryland completed the implementation of an online family and provider portal. This has streamlined the enrollment process, making access to necessary childcare quicker and more seamless. I want to thank Natalie Andrade. Did I get that right? I'm so sorry. I'll be better at that. And thank you so much for what you've done when working with us, and welcome to our team. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Cook, who is going to review the department's analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. For the Managing for Results section, the department was asked to provide an update on the kindergarten readiness assessment evaluation activities requested by the Accountability Implementation Board and the timeline for submitting the requested report. MSDE took extra time for a thorough analysis and discussion of the Maryland Kindergarten Readiness KRA report. The objective is to identify and address biases and develop effective strategies for a valid and reliable assessment. Dr. Wright will address the report during the Maryland State Board of Education meeting on February 27th, 2024. And MSDE commits to sending the finalized report to AIB by the same date. Next, MSDE was asked to comment on the specific factors contributing to the continued decrease in childcare capacity. Capacity is defined by the number of children authorized on the license, and enrollment is the number of children who are currently occupying those seats within a program. Overall, the number of family childcare homes has decreased following a national trend that existed prior to the pandemic. This is offset by increased enrollment in existing programs participating in the Child Care Scholarship Program. This is a nice segue into the next item. The increase in enrollment is directly attributed to the effectiveness of initiatives like the Growing Opportunities in Family Child Care Program, or GO-FCC, Maryland Rebuilds Grants, Child Care Stabilization Grants, and other support to improve child care providers' business practices. The Child Care Scholarship Program's comparison between actual child enrollment data and licensing capacity of those programs has shown a substantial 44% increase statewide in enrollment for children of low income and working families. Between January 2023 and January 2024, the Growing Opportunities for Family Child Care Program produced 88 new programs, with another 36 in the pipeline. 62 programs registered with Maryland Excels, which is our quality rating and improvement system, and they reached a level 3, which is a marker of quality. 58 new programs are set up to accept the Child Care Scholarship Program, continuing to expand the number of families who have access to this much needed service. Maryland Rebuilds produced the first Maryland Department of Labor registered state family child care apprenticeship program. An early childhood registered apprenticeship program is well on its way to achieving the same status. So we have another in the pipeline. We're very excited about this initiative. Nearly 200 early childhood educators participated in workforce initiatives such as the registered apprenticeship programs, gaining new credentials, degrees, and on-the-job learning opportunities. The child care stabilization grants enabled the department to provide support to providers, preventing permanent closure for many during the COVID-19 pandemic and after. Strengthening business practices training developed through the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance, which is a branch of the Administration for Children and Families at the federal level, has been provided across the state. Between 2022 and 2023, 59 child care center modules were delivered and 107 family child care modules were delivered. Maryland Child Care Boost, coordinated by the Maryland Family Network, was implemented at 3 child care resource centers. The cumulative result of these training opportunities was a 79% improvement in business knowledge and acumen. Next, MSDE was asked to share potential metrics for the period after presumptive eligibility. The Maryland State Department of Education's Child Care Scholarship vendor customer service hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The extended customer service hours are Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We ensured that we increased those hours so that we could serve our customers. Customers not submitting all documentation have 30 days to complete the Child Care Scholarship application process. The Maryland State Department of Education's Child Care Scholarship vendor has 5 days to complete the application process. The vendor processed an average of 81.76% of initial applications and 86.7% of redetermination applications timely for August, September, and October of 2023. MSDE was asked to comment on the timing of implementing administrative and information technology changes, their associated costs, and plans for future implementation. MSDE implemented advance payment in January 2023 and a fast track application process or presumptive eligibility in July 2023, increasing program costs due to the Child Care Administration Tracking System or CCATS enhancement. Improving the current system involves programming efforts with associated costs influenced by the complexity and expense of maintaining the CCATS legacy system. Current engagements include migrating and enhancing CCATS to a Salesforce cloud-based environment for licensing and child care scholarship processes. This migration is an opportunity to re-engineer the system, meeting evolving agency needs and enhancing customer service, leading to smoother payment processes for providers and staff. Expected to be implemented by November 2024, the project has a projected cost of $22 million with the yearly expenditures post-implementation estimated at $14 million, aiming for stabilized and potentially reduced overall costs. The total maintenance costs support the policy and systems changes. MSDE was asked to comment on a plan and timeline to competitively bid the Child Care Scholarship Program forecasting services in the future. The current contract ends in November 2024. MSDE is currently beginning the process of issuing a request for proposals, RFP. MSDE was asked to provide detailed savings estimates for increasing copays and implementing an enrollment freeze. The department's response document contains tables illustrating savings, based on implementing copays, as well as savings based on implementing an enrollment freeze. MSC was asked to comment on the impact of the Maryland Child Care Credential Program. The program serves as a career ladder, recognizing providers for exceeding state licensing and registration requirements, supporting skill and credential development. Funding in FY 2025 is crucial for continued support. As of August 2021-2023, Maryland had 57,584 early care and education teachers. Currently, 18%, or 10,408 of all early care and education teachers participate in the program, awarding bonuses amounting to more than $2.7 million in FY 23. Regarding the proposed pre-K sliding scale, MSC was asked to clarify whether the updated definition of Tier 1 children was incorporated in the calculation of pre-K formula funding in fiscal year 2024 or fiscal year 2025. The department included the updated definition of Tier 1 children in the FY 25 pre-kindergarten formula calculations. The updated definition includes children with disabilities and children whose home language is other than English, whose family's income qualifies for Tier 2 to be funded as Tier 1 for fiscal year 2025. The updated definition did not apply in FY 2024. Further, the department plans for enrollment collection in fall 2024 to include the following: multiple webinars, technical assistance sessions, and office hours for local education agencies and private providers and families to ensure all stakeholders have access to the pre-kindergarten registration and cost information. MSC plans to collect household income data for both local education agencies and private provider pre-kindergarten children in fall 2024. Guidance for FY 2025 emphasizes the importance of collecting data for each child at the period of enrollment, regardless of disabilities or multilingual status. In FY 25, if income data is not provided at the time of enrollment, the child will be enrolled as a Tier 3 student, paying the full cost of pre-kindergarten. The department was asked to provide child care stabilization grant expenditures by use. In the fall of 2021 round, MSCE dispersed $158.9 million to 5,207 providers. This allocation was based on a combination of $15,000 base funding and $500 per slot, resulting in grants ranging from $15,500 to $233,000. In the winter 2022 round, MSC distributed $109.5 million to 5,371 providers. This distribution was based on $10,000 base funding and $126 per infant and toddler slot, child care scholarship slot, or social vulnerability slot, resulting in grants ranging from $10,000 to $247,510,000. In the spring 2022 round, MSCE allocated $26.8 million to 5,439 providers. Similarly, this distribution was based on a $10,000 base funding and $126 per infant and toddler, child care scholarship, and social vulnerability index slot, with grants ranging from $10,000 to $247,510. During the fall 2023 round, MSCE distributed $33.7 million in governor stabilization funding to 5,190 providers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comprehensive response. And we also want to continue to salute the work to expand access to our early child care programs. That's something Maryland should definitely be proud of. And that was in partnership. So glad that that's happened. I know I've been beating kind of a dead horse, but I got to lift up that we still remain very concerned that there is a proposed revenue increase on behalf of some of our working families in Maryland that are most vulnerable. So we want to continue to be in thought partnership with you around that, because to go from no copay to maybe the upwards of $400 a month, that's significant for most households, and that deeply troubles us. So we wanted to lift that up. I also have a question, and then I'll make sure our other delegates are able to get involved. I saw that there was a reduction or maybe a zeroing out of the childcare credentialing development fund. And I know at the same time we want to expand access and get more providers and providers with diverse, experiences with different language skills, what have you. That fund seems like it would be critical to ensuring that they're able to be ready to be properly vetted and accepted into the childcare program, but also that they'll be prepared to meet the level of standard through Excels. That's also important to us. We don't want just everyone putting out a shingle saying they're a childcare provider. We want them to be the best quality, possible. So I wanted to know if you could speak to the zeroing out of those funds and how you would approach, the capacity issues in light of that.
Right. So the Maryland Child Care Credential Program, we believe it's vital to fund. We think it's an essential program, as you outlined, to support teachers in terms of a career ladder, and also supporting them with bonuses along the way as they continue to achieve more skills and gain more knowledge and best practices to serve children and families. And that does align very closely with Maryland Excels and our quality rating and improvement system, which we're very focused on improvement and support of the workforce.
So why is there no money in it?
So there's a in statute, it zeroes out in FY 2024.
Okay.
And so we'd like that to extend.
You would like
if
that to
possible.
extend.
Yes,
That's what you're
if
saying on the
possible,
record.
if possible, yes.
Great to hear that. I believe Delegate, no longer? Oops, you're out of business now? Okay, Delegate Geist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the most efficient subcommittee, probably in the General Assembly, right? I mean, we're on the same page here, but this question actually, I'm looking at Appendix 4. So this is a chart that shows, that talks about the 2023 pre-kindergarten expansion grant allocations. And I'm looking at the total in FY 23, it was 30 million. And then 2024 working is 99, and it jumps to 132 in our next year's budget. And that's a very considerable investment, and which I wholeheartedly support. I guess my question is that our LEAs, they're struggling to find space, they're struggling to find teachers, and our private providers, they're struggling to find help. So the struggle is that we're not actually expanding because of those constraints. So my question is this money has it been spent in 23? Will it be spent in the current working fiscal year? And are we confident that we're going to be able to spend $132 million in next year's budget? And how will it be spent?
Yes, so I can talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we've done as a State Department is we've invested in private providers. One of the initiatives that we launched this year was called Push to Pre-K, where we worked with private providers, providing technical assistance way ahead of time to help them on the pathway towards being able to apply successfully for the FY 25 grants. So we talked a little bit about quality. We talked about grant writing. We talked about what staffing requirements were needed to be in place. So a lot of that information was shared proactively at the start of FY 24 so that we could pave the path for FY 25. In addition, using American Rescue Plan Act funding, we also invested in a new grant program, one-time grant program called the Pre-K Capacity Building Grant, where we supported primarily private providers and giving them capacity funding per child at a lower rate than the Blueprint funding. But what this did is we were able to also provide more intensive technical assistance to help them implement pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds, and also help them achieve the quality rating that they would need in a successful application for FY25. So we're very excited to have those folks transition over when the grant application becomes available for FY25. In terms of was the money spent, the answer to that is yes. We've expanded seats, and we are continuing to build partnerships with nonprofits that are supporting private providers with a lot of the back end services around switching to serve pre-K students with state funding. We've also talked with both local education agencies and private providers about blending and braiding funding, and we will be releasing more guidance on that. So using federal funds, state funds, and blending those together to serve a larger number of children, to increase the pay for the lead teacher and assistant teacher, and also really making sure you're serving a group of students that are socially and economically diverse.
So now, it's required in the blueprint to provide 3-year-old pre-K up to 300% of poverty. That'll go to 600%. And talking about the challenges that we've already had, I mean, how close are we to getting to 300 now? And I know that a lot of the private providers, at least in my district, they're telling me that they have huge waiting lists. They're turning kids away. Some of which may be in that under 300% poverty list. Some may be over that and they don't qualify. But how confident are we that we're going to be able to hit those goals?
So one of the things we're doing this year is we're really pushing, and we'll be talking about this at the next Maryland State Board of Education meeting in February. We're really pushing private providers to capture at the time of enrollment whether a family is tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. We haven't had that data before. So having that data will help us set clear KPIs that you're talking about. So we'll be able to know more when we have that data. But we are, given all the efforts that we've put in place to support private providers in accessing this pre-kindergarten grant, we do expect to see some increases in programs that are serving 3- and 4-year-olds.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for this panel? We do have some other witnesses. Well, I just want to say thank you for the work you're doing. It's not easy, but I do also want to lift up that it is not unusual for agencies to fund things outside of code. So don't let a sunset stop you. All right, thank you. We do have some individual witnesses. We have Laura Wildryer, Lisa Klingenmeyer, and Ellie Cowan. And I do want to apologize, Ms. Cowan. I did not realize you also signed up for the previous panel, so that's my apology. Would you mind beginning with those remarks for the record?
I would love to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. For the record, Ellie Cowan, I'm here today on behalf of SEIU Local 500, who represents over 20,000 workers, including educational support professionals in Maryland. We're here to offer our support to the Aid to Education budget and encourage full and adequate funding for the programs that support our K through 12 classrooms. So thank you very much. That concludes my
Perfect.
Yeah.
So now you can begin your testimony for this panel, and then we'll.
Great. Again, Ellie Cowan for SEIU 500. Here to offer our testimony in regards to the early childhood early childhood development budget. Chair Smith, you beat me to the punch on one of my questions about the Child Care Career and Professional Development Fund. The childcare industry in Maryland, while it may be increasing in some sectors, is still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, which was devastating. I think we all understand the importance of adequate childcare and the importance of pre-kindergarten classrooms for the state and for our youngest citizens here in Maryland. And what we see is that programs like that CCC PDF, programs like the Child Care Scholarship, programs like the pre-K expansion grants are absolutely essential to help close the gap in keeping our current providers in the profession and encouraging new providers to join the profession. I think every single one of your districts, you've probably heard from constituents or experienced it yourself, that there is not enough childcare providers out there. I know I experienced the difficulty in finding even a slot in a timely fashion for childcare. I know of people who are experiencing that with pre-K slots as well. So in order to reach the goals of the blueprint for the mixed delivery system of public pre-K, we need to be fully investing in all of these programs that are lifting up our childcare and pre-K professionals and encouraging those programs to continue. One of the biggest problems that the industry is facing with the advancement of full universal public pre-K is that without the 3s and 4s, our childcare centers and providers are going to have to close. The financials just don't make sense. And so we're already at a point where we're at a deficit in terms of providers. We can't afford to lose any more at this point. I say this every year. The only reason I'm here is because of childcare, and I'm able to afford that childcare. And I know many people who are not, and our providers are often, closing the gap between families of theirs who can't afford, who had issues with the reimbursements for the scholarship program. And I appreciate MSDE's work in trying to work with providers and families to make that system better. I would encourage them to continue to do so. And so with that, we really, we would hope to see, again, full and adequate funding for these programs because they are absolutely essential. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Ms. Wildryer.
Madam Chair, honorable members, good afternoon. My name is Laura Wheeldryer. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland Family Network, a statewide nonprofit children's advocacy organization, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I actually considered bringing pom-poms with me today because who doesn't love a testimony prop? Silly, yes, but actually there is a lot to celebrate in this budget. The amount of resources it dedicates to Maryland's children and their families is nothing short of extraordinary. I also want to acknowledge the new and improved leadership at MSDE. It is truly great to have Dr. Wright and Dr. Cook on board. We are very lucky as a state to have them here with us at this critical time in early childhood education. And while in many ways it's a new day at MSDE, I also don't want us to ignore serious issues from the past as we set a course for the future. And also, we've just come off a period of time of learning a lot of lessons about what families in Maryland need. Over the past 6 years, starting with legislation in 2018, we took lessons learned about young children, their families, and childcare, and we started fixing them. And this is actually your leadership at work. For example, not even a year ago, you and your colleagues enacted legislation requiring the administration and MSD to notify you, the General Assembly, if and when they had intentions of imposing cost containment on the Child Care Scholarship Program. That bill has worked exactly as it was intended because on January 9th of this year, MSD informed you that it is proposing to reimpose co-payments on working families who rely on Child Care Scholarship to subsidize the high cost of childcare so that they can enter and remain in the workforce. Again, that bill worked exactly as intended. And now the proposal to ask working families to shoulder higher childcare costs is in your hands. As advocates, we are grateful for the transparency and especially for the opportunity to urge you to reject this proposal. We are also concerned about the focus the DLS analysis puts on the prospect of an enrollment freeze and waitlist. That prospect is heightened by a provision in the BRFA, which seeks to repeal the core of last year's bill and reassert unilateral authority to impose an enrollment freeze on childcare scholarship and reestablish a waitlist. That is deeply problematic. Enrollment freezes are profoundly destructive, not just to individual families, but to childcare scholarship as a whole. As the analysis notes, the last time MSD imposed an enrollment freeze was 2011. The program remained closed to many otherwise eligible families until 2018, 7 long years later. At the high mark of that period, more than 20,000 children languished on a wait list. I urge you today to retain the General Assembly's direct oversight and do everything in your power to prevent destructive enrollment freezes in the future or the reimposition of co-payments for working families. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lisa Klingenmeyer. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland Rise, which is an organization that works to promote economic opportunity for all Marylanders. We're here today in strong support for the budget of the Early Childhood Division, and in particular, the budget for the Child Care Scholarship Program. As already mentioned, we thank the administration for the historic investment in this program and all the work that has been done by the General Assembly and by the governor to expand access to this program. If there were pom-poms here, I'd wave them too. Really, really excited about the work that's been done around the program. At the same time, we are very alarmed by the cost-cutting measures that are proposed around the Child Care Scholarship Program. Money for the Child Care Scholarship Program is not an expense, it's an investment. It's an investment in our children. It's an investment in working Marylanders. It's an investment in our economy. And we know that budget challenges lie ahead and there are decisions that are going to have to be made, but addressing them by curtailing access to the Child Care Scholarship Program through waitlist or by levying hundreds of dollars a month on the low-income families who are a part of the program shouldn't be on the table as a way to try and work the budget so that we have cuts in places. They are compelling reasons to talk about revenue enhancement so that we're not having to make impossible choices about which programs we fund, but we can instead fund all the priorities in our state's budget. We want to build an economy that works for everyone. We want the funding and the access to the Child Care Scholarship Program so that it can work now and into the future for all Maryland families. We thank you for your time. We support the budget and strongly urge against any cost-saving measures in the Child Care Scholarship Program. Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. It's a lot of pom-poms going on today, so greatly appreciate you. Any questions for our panel here? No questions. Appreciate that. So that concludes our budget hearing, and actually concludes our budget hearing for today. Thank you.